Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're tracing the fascinating evolutionary arc of how we humans actually absorb information. We're constantly updating the operating systems on our phones and computers, making sure they can handle new data and run faster. But what about the ultimate processor, the human brain? In a lot of ways, our scientific understanding of the brain is exactly like a software program. It's been patched, debugged, and seriously upgraded over time. So let's dive in and explore how our foundational theories of learning have evolved, all the way from ancient philosophy right up to today's digital age.
We have to start with the big one, a fundamental question that has literally puzzled philosophers, psychologists, and scientists for centuries. How does a human being actually learn something new? It sounds so simple, right? But the mechanics of taking a brand new concept from the outside world and permanently wiring it into our internal understanding, well, it's one of the most incredibly complex phenomena in nature.
To demystify all these complex psychologies, let's take a quick look at our agenda. It's kind of our mental map for today. We'll start with the quest to understand learning, move into behaviorism and its actions and reactions, crack open the inner workings of cognitivism and constructivism, hit the digital upgrade with connectivism, and wrap up with neuroscience and the future.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the quest to understand learning. Where did this age-old journey begin?
Well, setting the historical stage, we have to go way back to 428 BC. Plato proposed this idea called the theory of recollection. Basically, he wondered, if a topic is entirely brand new to someone, how can they possibly understand it? His answer? We already know it. He thought knowledge was innate, present the moment we're born, and learning was just the soul recalling what it already knew. Fast forward a couple thousand years to 1632, and John Locke swings the pendulum completely the other way with empiricism. The famous blank slate. Locke argued, nope, zero innate knowledge. We are born totally blank, just waiting for our experiences to write the code. And these giant philosophical debates, they eventually culminated in 1913 when John B. Watson founded behaviorism, finally shifting the whole conversation from abstract philosophy into observable science.
And to make sure we're looking at all of this through a solid, rigorous lens, we're grounding our explainer today in core academic literature, like the International Journal of Asian Education. This helps us see exactly how those classical ideas evolved into the frameworks that dominate our schools and workplaces right now. Which brings us to Section 2, Behaviorism, focusing on actions and reactions.
So, behaviorism. Championed by Watson and later B.F. Skinner, this was a massive revolution, but honestly a pretty rigid one. It viewed human beings strictly in terms of physical phenomena. They essentially treated the brain like a locked black box. Behaviorists didn't care about your internal intelligence, your talents, or your invisible feelings. To them, human behavior was controlled entirely by the outside environment, specifically rewards and reinforcements. In their eyes, learning was quite literally just training a reflex over and over until it became a hardwired habit.
Under this model, learning is viewed as a highly structured, mechanical process of conditioning. It breaks down into 3 simple steps. Step 1, you introduce a specific stimulus. Step 2, an observable reflexive response happens. And Step 3, that response is met with either a reward or a punishment. You've probably heard of Pavlov's dogs salivating at the sound of a bell, right? That's it exactly. The huge takeaway here is that behaviorism sees learning purely as an absolute modification of behavior driven by external triggers. The conscious thought process happening underneath, totally ignored.
But what happens when we finally need to look inside the mind? Moving on to Section 3, Cognitivism and Constructivism, Inner Workings. This era brought about a massive paradigm shift. Basically, cognitivism actively rebelled against behaviorism. Psychologists realized, wait a minute, humans aren't just mindlessly reacting to bells and treats. We are actively thinking, problem-solving beings. So instead of treating the brain as an unknowable black box, they started viewing it like an incredibly powerful computer processor. Learning wasn't just a physical habit anymore, it was recognized as an internal mental process, involving things like short-term memory, long-term recall, and actively organizing really complex thoughts.
Emerging out of this shift was Gestalt psychology. Cognitivists like Max Wertheimer and Kurt Lewin proved that we actually learn by making sense of patterns in relationships. It's all about cognitive insight, not just isolated stimuli. Think about looking at a brick house. You don't just see a random pile of individual bricks, do you? Your mind automatically organizes those pieces into a meaningful whole, the house. The whole is more than its parts. So learning relies heavily on your prior knowledge and your ability to see that big picture.
Constructivism takes that idea and pushes it a vital step further. The main principle here is that learners actively construct their own knowledge. We aren't just empty vessels passively receiving facts. And a super fascinating part of this is cognitive conflict. Constructivists believe real learning only happens when you hit a wall, when you encounter new information that completely clashes with what you thought you knew. You have to mentally rebuild your internal schema to make the new facts fit. In this framework, the teacher isn't just a dictator of facts. They act as a facilitator, guiding you through this messy, active process of building meaning from your environment.
But as the internet arrived, the game changed again. Here's Section 4, Connectivism, the digital upgrade. As we enter the 21st century, let's look at how our modern reality challenges the very boundaries of the mind. Just look at this number, 18 months. According to the American Society of Training and Documentation, the total amount of knowledge in the entire world is now doubling every single 18 months. That is wild. We have fully transitioned from an era where information was scarce to a reality where it is overwhelmingly, relentlessly abundant.
And this staggering quote from researcher Gonzalez really nails why our older theories desperately need an update. He talks about the shrinking half-life of knowledge. That's the time span between learning a fact and that fact becoming completely obsolete. He notes that half of what is known today simply wasn't known 10 years ago. So how on earth are we supposed to construct a rigid internal house of meaning like Constructivism wants us to when the foundational facts of our fields are expiring faster than milk in the fridge?
Well, that's exactly where theorist George Siemens steps in with connectivism. It's literally a learning theory built for the digital age. Siemens argues that learning is no longer just this internal, isolated activity. Instead, learning rests in a diversity of opinions, and it happens by plugging into a massive information grid. And here is the real game changer. Actionable knowledge can actually reside outside of us in non-human appliances. Think databases, online communities, search engines. Your capacity to know more, to connect to those nodes, is now far more critical than whatever happens to be in your head right now.
What this ultimately means is that historically, the education system was totally obsessed with know-how and know-what. But today, those are being aggressively supplemented by know-where. Knowing exactly where to find the knowledge you need at the exact second you need it is absolutely vital. The pipe that connects you to the information has become way more important than the content currently sitting inside the pipe. Let's see how science is physically defining all of this in Section 5, Neuroscience and the Future.
Because knowledge workers today operate in this crazy, rapidly shifted networked landscape, we're dealing with what scientists actually call chaos. But chaos in learning isn't just a random mess. It's a cryptic form of order where the meaning already exists out there in the network. Unlike constructivism, where you have to build meaning from scratch, chaos theory says the learner's real challenge, their ultimate survival skill, is pattern recognition. It's about looking at a flood of data, seeing the hidden connections, and adapting instantly when the underlying conditions change.
And modern educational neuroscience is rushing to catch up with these digital realities. Research institutes are actively exploring how our reliance on technology is quite literally rewiring the physical circuitry of our brains. They're utilizing advanced brain imaging, looking for the biological proof of exactly how plugging into these external digital networks physically impacts our neural pathways.
Now, this huge transition doesn't just apply to individual students. It scales up to entire organizations. Think about it. In the old industrial economy, information flow was managed super rigidly, top-down, heavily controlled, kind of like oil pumping through a steel pipe. But in today's knowledge economy, information flow is organic. It meanders and adapts like a river flowing through a complex ecosystem. Organizations have to self-organize, just like our minds do. Nurturing that dynamic, open flow of information is the absolute baseline for modern corporate health.
Which brings us to the end of this explainer, and I want to leave you with a really provocative thought to chew on. We've evolved from thinking knowledge is innate, to treating the brain like a simple reflex machine, to seeing it as a complex processor, and now to viewing learning as an external network of digital connections. So as you sit there reflecting on how your own mind is currently plugged into the digital world, ask yourself, if our knowledge is now stored out there in our networks, our databases, and our search engines, what does it truly mean for you as an individual to know something today? Thank you so much for exploring the upgrade of the mind with me. Keep learning and keep connecting.